Right now, the name Alex Eala is sitting firmly inside the top 30 of the 2026 WTA World Rankings. This is not just a career milestone. It is an absolute earthquake in the global tennis landscape. It is a reality that the entire tennis establishment thought was biologically and structurally impossible for a player from Southeast Asia. But behind the blinding stadium lights and the sudden explosion of international media coverage, there is a brutal truth that very few people are willing to talk about. To understand exactly how a girl from the Philippines managed to crush the giants of global tennis we have, to go back to the exact moment when every single door seemed to slam shut right in her face. Just picture the scene for a second. You are standing on a massive stadium court in America. The crowd is roaring loud enough to shake the concrete beneath your feet. The opponent across the net is a 6 foot tall powerhouse bred in an elite European tennis academy. You are thousands of miles away from your home. You are carrying the hopes of over 100 million people on your very shoulders. Most athletes would completely crumble under that kind of crushing weight. But Alex Eala took that suffocating pressure and forged it into an unstoppable weapon. How did she go from being a promising junior prodigy to an absolute nightmare for the top seeds on the professional tour? What exact psychological shift and technical evolution allowed her to completely shatter the glass ceiling of professional tennis? We're about to break down the precise formula that turned her into the pride of the Philippines and the most dangerous underdog on the entire WTA Tour. Carrying Filipino blood is an incredible source of immense pride, but on a professional tennis court, it can also be an overwhelming and isolating burden. When Ayala first stepped onto the professional adult circuit, she realized very quickly that she was not just fighting the player on the other side of the net. She was fighting an entire global system designed to keep her out. Tennis is a sport historically dominated by wealthy Western nations with endless financial resources. They have the billion-dollar training academies. They have the cutting-edge sports science departments. They have a built-in geographical advantage that saves them from chronic jet lag and endless homesickness. Iyala had to build her entire foundation on pure grit and relentless determination. Let us rewind a few years to look at the starting line. She is completely dominating the junior circuits. She is winning Grand Slam junior titles and lifting trophies. Everyone loves a young prodigy. But the transition from junior tennis to the ruthless adult professional tour is the exact place where dreams usually go to die. The ball comes back much heavier. The serves are terrifyingly faster. The psychological warfare is completely relentless. Iyala had to make a massive choice early on. She could stay comfortable as a celebrated local legend in her region, or she could walk straight into the lion den. She chose the fire. She packed her bags and headed straight into the most brutal low-level tournaments across Europe and the United States. She left her comfort zone completely behind to chase a vision no one else could see. The physical and mental toll of this decision was immediate and harsh. Imagine playing a grueling 3-hour match on thick red clay in the freezing European spring. Your lungs are burning for oxygen. Your muscles are screaming for relief. You look up into the stands and you see absolutely no one you know. It is just you against the world. Every single point feels like a matter of absolute survival. This is the harsh reality of the professional tennis grind that the television cameras never show the fans back home. You lose a heartbreaking match in the first round. You pack your bags in a quiet, empty locker room. You take a cheap train to the next obscure city and you do it all over again the very next morning. It is a vicious cycle that breaks even the strongest elite athletes. But this is exactly where the foundation of a true champion is forged in the dark. Those lonely nights in budget hotels and those agonizing narrow losses were doing something essential to her character. They were slowly stripping away her fear of failure. She was learning how to survive in a predatory ecosystem designed to chew up players exactly like her. The European and American players had the height and the pure raw physical power. Ayala had to rely on something else entirely. She had to rely on superior court geometry and an unbreakable mental fortress. She knew that to beat them, she had to become completely unrecognizable from the girl who first left Manila. She had to undergo a metamorphosis that would shock the entire tennis establishment to its core. If you have ever felt like the ultimate underdog facing impossible odds in your own life, you know exactly how lonely and terrifying that journey can be. Join our community right now by subscribing to the channel so we can keep bringing you these incredible stories of pure human resilience. Because the truth is, Iyala was about to face a test so agonizing that it nearly broke her spirit completely. The sky over Europe seemed colder than ever during that brutal stretch of the season. Those early round losses were piling up in the most agonizing way possible. The returns were just not clearing the net by absolute fractions of an inch. The physical exhaustion was completely draining her body from the inside out. Every single time she stepped onto the thick red clay of the European circuit or the blistering hard courts of the American swing, the physical disparity became glaringly obvious. The modern WTA Tour is an absolute battleground of giants. Women who stand well over 6 feet tall dominate the baseline with brutal, heavy ground strokes. When Eala faced these towering opponents, the sheer geometry of the court seemed to work entirely against her. The ball bounced violently higher. The serves rained down with terrifying velocity. The media back home in the Philippines began to whisper with deep concern. Articles started popping up questioning her long-term potential. Journalists asked if she had already reached her absolute ceiling as a professional athlete. They wondered aloud if an Asian player could truly survive the brutal modern power era of women tennis. You could practically hear the collective heartbeat of her fan base dropping with every missed forehand and every broken serve. It was a deeply frustrating period where nothing seemed to click together. The pressure was no longer just a vague feeling in the back of her mind. It was a suffocating physical presence that followed her everywhere she went. Imagine waking up in a cramped hotel room thousands of miles away from the warm embrace of Manila. Your body is aching intensely from a 3-hour marathon loss the day before. You check your phone and see thousands of notifications flooding your screen. Some fans are endlessly supportive. Many others are incredibly impatient and openly critical. The weight of an entire developing nation is pressing down on your chest before you even tie your tennis shoes for morning practice. This is the darkest valley of the professional tennis tour. The relentless intercontinental traveling, and the harsh, unfamiliar climates and the towering hostile opponents all combine to break you down mentally and physically. During this grueling stretch, she faced a series of agonizingly close defeats that would have completely destroyed the spirit of a lesser athlete. She would win the first set brilliantly, using her speed and tactical intelligence. Then, the taller and stronger European players would simply overpower her in the decider. They would hit much heavier topspin that pushed her far behind the baseline. They would serve unreturnable aces down the tee exactly when they needed them the most. The physical toll on her body was completely undeniable. She was fighting desperately for every single point, while her opponents seemed to rely on sheer genetic advantages to cruise through the difficult moments of a match. The tennis experts sitting in their comfortable temperature-controlled broadcasting booths began to quietly write her off. They called her a great regional talent who ultimately lacked the absolute firepower necessary to break the top 30 barrier. They thought she would fade away into the background like so many other young prodigies who could not handle the brutal reality of the senior tour. But they did not see the intense fire burning underneath that overwhelming exhaustion. They did not understand what actually happens when you push a fierce natural-born competitor completely into a corner. Every devastating loss was adding raw fuel to a massive internal shift. The suffocating anxiety and the fear of failure were slowly burning away. What remained was nothing but cold, calculated fury. The tennis world thought she was breaking down physically and mentally. But she was not breaking down at all. She was quietly resetting her entire biological and mental framework. Every analyst believed she had reached her absolute limit. They had no idea that from this exact abyss, a completely new WTA monster was about to be unleashed. People normally crumble under that kind of crushing global pressure. But rare individuals take that exact same pressure and forge it into an unbreakable diamond. There was a specific, definitive moment when the narrative completely flipped upside down. The psychological shift was incredibly sudden, and it was absolutely terrifying for anyone standing across the net from her. She revealed the exact nature of this profound transformation in a remarkably candid interview. She looked straight into the camera and delivered a statement that sent chills down the spine of every dedicated fan. She explained that the overwhelming pressure of representing the Philippines used to suffocate her completely. It felt like a heavy chain dragging her down during crucial points. But then she made a conscious, deeply powerful decision to change her reality. Now, every single time she steps onto a massive stadium court, she does not feel the burden anymore. She feels the terrifying raw strength of over 100 million people standing directly behind her. She took the massive weight of a nation and weaponized it. That is the exact moment the fear completely vanished from her game. You could see it clearly in her eyes during the warm-ups. The hesitant young girl who was just hoping to survive the European tour was gone forever. In her place stood a cold-blooded competitor who stepped onto the court not to participate but to dominate the space. She finally stopped playing not to lose and started playing to completely destroy the opposition. I have to ask you a serious question right now. When you hear about that exact mental shift where the crushing weight of a nation suddenly turns into an unstoppable source of power, how does that make you feel? Drop down into the comments below and tell me if you have ever used a massive emotional burden to fuel your own personal breakthrough, because reading those incredible stories is the absolute best part of building this community with you. The transition on the court was absolutely explosive. During a crucial tournament against a heavily favored top 20 powerhouse, the new version of Alex Eala finally revealed herself. She found herself down a break in the final set. The crowd was tense. The familiar narrative of physical exhaustion seemed ready to play out again. A year ago, she would have undoubtedly folded under the immense physical strain and the heavy ball striking of her opponent, but this time she dug her heels into the hard court. She unleashed a blistering cross-court forehand that shattered the confidence of her opponent instantly. The energy in the stadium spiked aggressively. She broke back immediately. She held her serve with absolute authority. She ripped a massive return winner down the line to seal the match. The crowd erupted into absolute chaos. The catharsis of that specific victory echoed across the entire globe. The Filipino fans who had suffered through all those heartbreaking narrow losses with her were finally rewarded with a moment of pure unadulterated triumph. She was no longer just a promising Asian player, trying to hold her own against the giants. She was now a legitimate, terrifying threat to the established tennis hierarchy. The heavy ground strokes of her opponents no longer pushed her behind the baseline. Instead of retreating, she stepped aggressively inside the court and took the ball incredibly early. She weaponized her elite court positioning to steal precious time away from the bigger players. She turned their massive baseline power entirely against them, using brilliant defensive angles and surgical offensive precision. Her entire bodily posture changed drastically. She walked between points with a terrifying certainty. The opponents, who used to look completely past her in the crowded locker rooms, suddenly started watching her practice sessions with deep visible concern. The psychological chains were completely broken and shattered on the floor. She had officially cracked the complex code of mental toughness on the elite WTA tour. But a mental breakthrough alone cannot single-handedly crush the top 30 world rankings in the highly competitive landscape of 2026. A strong mind desperately needs a devastating physical weapon to execute its violent will on the court. The psychological evolution was fully complete. But to completely kick down the door to the elite inner circle of professional tennis, she needed a technical upgrade that would absolutely paralyze her competition. Supreme confidence is absolutely meaningless if you do not have a lethal physical weapon to enforce your will on the court. Do not just look at the unbreakable spirit of Eala as the sole reason for her sudden success. You need to look directly at the staggering physical metrics that have completely terrified the global tennis establishment. Her first serve speed has increased to a level that defies all logical expectations for a player of her physical stature. This single biomechanical upgrade has directly transformed her into a massive point-generating machine on the modern WTA system. Before this explosive season, her serve was largely just a mechanism to start the point. It was a reliable but vulnerable shot that heavily aggressive returners would step in and attack without any hesitation. But during the offseason leading into 2026, she completely retooled her entire service motion. She spent thousands of grueling hours locked inside empty stadiums, perfecting the absolute exact angles of her racket head and the timing of her weight transfer. When she finally unleashed this newly refined weapon, the radar guns at the major tournaments started flashing numbers that left the stadium crowds absolutely stunned. She is now consistently hitting first serves with devastating velocity and pinpoint surgical accuracy. This is the exact data point that has completely altered the trajectory of her professional career. Her accumulated ranking points on the 2026 WTA leaderboard skyrocketed in an unstoppable upward trajectory. We are talking about a mathematical climb that completely shattered the historical averages for players in her specific age bracket. She is no longer just defending her ranking points at smaller regional tournaments. She is actively flying across the globe and stealing massive amounts of points from the highest-ranked players in the world at the most prestigious events on the calendar. Think about the established giants of the sport she has completely dismantled over the last few months. Players who used to bully her around the court with heavy topspin are now completely paralyzed on the return. The highest-seeded European and American powerhouse players are suddenly taking 3 steps backward when she tosses the ball into the air. The fear in their eyes is absolutely palpable. They can no longer dictate the pace of the match because Eala is ending the points instantly with unreturnable flat serves down the center line. She has turned the most stressful moments of a high-stakes match into a routine execution of pure power. But here is the absolute most fascinating detail that the mainstream commentators completely miss while they are excitedly shouting about the speed gun. If you look closely in extreme slow motion, you will see a microscopic shift in her underlying biomechanics. Watch exactly how she lands on her left leg after striking that massive new serve. The mainstream television broadcasters are completely obsessed with the raw velocity of the ball, but the real secret is in her kinetic chain absorption. By slightly altering her hip rotation and the exact angle of her knee flexion upon landing, she has effectively eliminated the dangerous shock absorption that causes chronic injuries on the brutal professional tour. She is hitting the ball significantly harder than ever before, while simultaneously protecting her knees and joints for a long, sustainable championship career. It is an absolute masterclass in modern sports science applied directly to the tennis court. She has essentially hacked her own physical limitations to generate elite power without paying the typical physical toll. This is exactly why the top elite coaches in the world are currently studying her practice footage with deep visible concern. This massive accumulation of ranking points in the 2026 season is not a stroke of luck or a fortunate tournament draw. It is the direct result of a perfectly executed technical blueprint. She identified her biggest vulnerability and engineered a custom weapon to completely obliterate it. Her rise up the rankings is mathematically undeniable. But this incredible story absolutely does not end with merely breaking the top 30 barrier. That is just the prologue to a much larger global narrative. When Eala stands on that baseline with a top 30 ranking next to her name, she is no longer just representing herself or her family. She is actively rewriting the entire history book of Philippine tennis and completely shifting the athletic paradigm for all of Southeast Asia. For decades, the global tennis establishment quietly believed that Asian players simply did not have the raw physical biology to dominate the modern baseline power era. Eala is actively destroying that outdated narrative with every single forehand winner she blasts past a bewildered opponent. She is proving to the entire world that tactical brilliance and mental ferocity and relentless technical evolution can completely neutralize pure genetic size. She has become the ultimate symbol of national pride for a country that breathes and bleeds sports. Every single time she wins a crucial match in a packed American stadium, she sends a massive shockwave of inspiration back to thousands of young kids playing on cracked public courts in Manila. They are watching her crush the global elite, and they are finally realizing that the exact same path is suddenly possible for them too. The top 30 is just a single milestone on a much longer and more ambitious journey. It is absolutely not the final destination for a fierce competitor with this extraordinary level of pure determination. The entire tennis world is now on high alert, watching her every single move with absolute fascination. What massive barrier do you think Alex Eala will completely crush next as she climbs even higher up the global rankings? Subscribe to the channel right now so you do not miss our next breakdown when she inevitably shocks the world all over again.